Pastor Bob Joyce. What if I told you the king of rock and roll is alive right now, singing hymns in a tiny church, and nobody's ever made him say it out loud? Sounds insane, right? Except millions of people believe exactly that. Stick with me, because this story has everything. A mystery voice, a secret bloodline, a leaked photo, and a twist at the end that's honestly scarier than the legend itself. Let's set the scene. On one side, you've got the single most famous entertainer who ever lived. A man whose face was on every wall, every lunchbox, every magazine cover, and whose death in 1977 stopped the whole planet in its tracks. On the other side, you've got a quiet, humble pastor running a small congregation out in rural Arkansas, a guy most Americans had never once heard of. Two lives that had zero business ever crossing paths, and yet, somehow, the internet decided these two men were the same man. Here's the name at the center of it all: Bob Joyce. Now, before you roll your eyes and picture some guy in a rhinestone jumpsuit doing karaoke at a casino, that's not what this is. This isn't your average Elvis impersonator. When people describe sitting in Bob Joyce's church and watching him sing, they don't say it feels like a tribute act. They say it feels like they're looking at the real guy, decades older, a little worn down by time, but still unmistakably him underneath it all. And then there's the part that really messes with people's heads. For a man supposedly hiding the biggest secret in music history, almost nothing exists about where he actually came from. Dig into his childhood, his early years, anything before he showed up preaching in Benton, Arkansas, and the trail just goes cold. To most of us, that just means the guy lived a normal, unremarkable life before he found his calling. But to somebody hunting for a conspiracy, silence like that doesn't read as boring. It reads as a cover-up. And here's the kicker. Bob Joyce never acted like a man who was annoyed by the rumor. He didn't get defensive. He didn't demand people cut it out. He carried the whole thing with this calm, almost knowing energy, like a guy who understood exactly why people were saying what they were saying. And when Elvis came up in conversation, Joyce didn't talk about him like some distant legend. He talked about him with this weirdly personal warmth, the kind of warmth you'd use for an old friend, or, if your mind was already spinning, for yourself. So that's the setup. Now let's get to the thing that actually kicked this whole legend into overdrive: the voice. Forget the theories for a second. Just listen. Because this is the part that even the skeptics have a hard time explaining away. When Bob Joyce stands up in that little church and sings the old gospel songs, something happens. The tone is deep, warm, a little rough around the edges in all the right places. The way he bends notes, the way his phrasing rises and falls, people swear it's identical to recordings cut over 60 years ago. And remember, Elvis himself always said gospel music was the thing closest to his heart, the sound he ran back to whenever the fame got too loud. So when a small-town preacher with supposedly zero connection to Elvis picks up those exact same sacred songs and sings them with that same trembling, aching devotion, well, that coincidence stops feeling like a coincidence real fast. Around 2011, clips of Joyce singing started circulating online, and they spread like wildfire through die-hard Elvis fans. And the reaction was always the same three stages: disbelief, goosebumps, and then this stubborn feeling that they were somehow listening to a ghost. By 2018, the story had gotten so big that actual news outlets were running headlines asking if Elvis was alive and preaching in Arkansas. People started driving hundreds of miles just to sit in that church, because a video on a phone screen wasn't enough anymore. They needed to hear it live. And almost none of them left more doubtful. They left more convinced, because standing a few feet away made the whole thing feel undeniable. Now, if this were only about the singing, this story probably fizzles out like every other celebrity rumor eventually does. But what turned this from a fun curiosity into a full-blown obsession was the family standing right next to him. The people closest to Bob Joyce, the relatives who sing and worship right by his side, apparently carry features that make true believers lean forward in their seats. Look at his sons, people say. Study the jawline, the eyes, the smile. It all supposedly echoes a face the entire world already knows by heart. When one of his sons stepped up to sing a song Elvis made famous, the internet nearly exploded, because to a grieving fan, that wasn't a cover. That was a bloodline showing itself. Then things got really wild. Word started spreading that a grandson, named Ben, had leaked a private photo, supposedly the smoking gun that proved the connection once and for all. That image tore across social media. Right alongside it came whispers of another photo, one that appeared to show none other than Priscilla Presley standing near the pastor, like the king's own ex-wife had quietly slipped into Arkansas to see him with her own eyes. And then came the moment that really sealed it for a lot of people: the funeral. When Lisa Marie Presley passed away and was laid to rest, a grainy photo started making the rounds online that seemed to show Bob Joyce sitting among the mourners. For believers, that was the final puzzle piece. Why on earth would some small-town Arkansas preacher be sitting at the private funeral of Elvis's own daughter, unless he was something more than a preacher? Unless he was family, in the most literal sense possible? Stack all of that together: the voice, the sons, the grandson's photo, the Priscilla look-alike, the seat at the funeral, and you've got a case that felt, to a lot of people, completely overwhelming. Any one of those pieces alone, easy to shrug off. All of them together, suddenly it doesn't feel so crazy anymore. So there was only one thing left that everybody wanted. And for years, the wildest part of this whole saga is that Bob Joyce almost gave it to them, over and over, without ever quite finishing the sentence. See, here's the thing. An innocent man accused of secretly being Elvis Presley would probably just laugh it off, right? Shake his head, deny it flatly, move on with his life. That is not what Bob Joyce did. Back in the fall of 2017, he finally addressed the rumors in writing, and the way he worded it was interesting, to put it mildly. He said that neither he nor anyone around him had ever tried to convince people he was somebody else. Now sit with that phrasing for a second. He's saying he never tried to make people believe it. But notice what he doesn't say. He never actually comes out and says, "I am not Elvis Presley." To ears that were already straining to hear a confession, that missing sentence felt massive. Then he added something that basically poured gasoline on the whole fire. He said most folks already knew he wasn't Elvis, but that it didn't seem to bother them much. And then came the line that true believers still quote to this day. He said, if Elvis were alive, he'd call him his friend, his brother, that the two of them were kindred spirits, one together in Christ. To a skeptic, that's just a preacher being poetic. To a believer, that's a coded wink. That's a man telling the truth, in the only language he feels safe using. One devoted follower, a guy named Tom Mennel, put it about as plainly as anyone could. He said that to him, Bob Joyce simply is Elvis, and that he prays for the day the pastor finally stands up and admits the truth. And that, right there, is the emotional engine of this entire legend. The denials became the proof. The humility became the evidence. The silence became a promise that people were convinced would eventually get kept. And a promise like that can only stay unbroken for so long. Because eventually, a fresh wave of videos hit the internet, all claiming the same explosive thing. The old man was finally out of time, out of reasons to hide, and the confession the world had been begging for was finally coming. So here we are, the moment this whole legend had been building toward for years. The videos came in hot and heavy, dripping with drama. He's dying, they said. He knows his time is almost up. And with whatever's left, he's finally going to look into the camera and tell the world exactly who he is. And you watch. And you wait. You wait for him to actually say the words. You wait for that one sentence every single video promised was coming. The moment he admits he's Elvis Presley and the king never really died. That confession never comes. Not once. Not in a single video, no matter how many of these things you sit through start to finish. The music swells, the tension builds to a boiling point, and then the clip just ends. No reveal. No bombshell. Just you, emotionally exhausted, no closer to any truth than when you hit play. Funny enough, One of the very blogs pushing these videos actually admitted it themselves in the article text, flat out saying the pastor never gave any direct confirmation, then asking whether this was even a real farewell or just an ending dressed up to look like one. And once you actually separate the facts from the internet hype, this whole theory falls apart fast. The videos making the rounds are blending two totally different men into one identity, and that single mistake unravels everything. Let's do the math. Elvis Aaron Presley was born in January of 1935. Bob Joyce was born in June of 1952. That's a 17-year age gap. If Elvis had somehow survived, he'd be in his 90s right now. Bob Joyce is visibly, obviously younger than that, which alone makes the whole claim fall apart before you even get to the rest of the evidence. Then there's Elvis's death itself, which was never some murky, unsolved mystery. He died at Graceland in August of 1977 at age 42. Family members witnessed it. Tennessee authorities documented it officially. Medical records confirming it still exist today. There is no missing chapter here, no gap in the story waiting to be filled in. Bob Joyce's own life backs this up even further. He's been married to his wife, Wilena, since 1975, and his life has actually been publicly documented for decades. The opposite of some mysterious drifter who appeared out of nowhere. And that funeral photo, the one everyone passed around as the smoking gun proof, it turned out to actually be a picture of country musician Andy Childs, not Bob Joyce at all. Just a straightforward case of mistaken identity that spread because barely anyone bothered to double-check it before hitting share. Maybe that's exactly why, when you look at the actual polling on this over the years, only a tiny sliver of people ever seriously believed Elvis was still alive. This legend didn't survive because the evidence held up. It survived because people wanted it to be true so badly that they stopped asking questions. And that's precisely the weakness these viral videos keep exploiting. Our willingness to choose a comforting mystery over a plain, ordinary fact. So let's just say it clean. Bob Joyce is not Elvis Presley. He never confessed to being Elvis, because there was never a confession to give in the first place, and there's no secret deathbed reveal sitting out there waiting to drop. He's exactly what he always claimed to be, a small-town preacher with a genuinely remarkable gift for singing old hymns. And if that leaves you feeling a little deflated, don't be embarrassed about it, because honestly, that empty feeling is kind of the whole point of this story. Because here's the truth, this was never really about the pastor. It was about us. It was about that stubborn, tender refusal to let go of a voice that got sewn into the best moments of our lives. For almost 50 years, people have kept Elvis alive through blurry gas station photos and roadside sightings. Not because they're gullible, but because grief and love just don't care what a death certificate says. What's changed, and changed fast, is that technology has learned exactly how to feed on that longing, and it does it without an ounce of mercy. This isn't just about one Arkansas preacher anymore. In just the past year alone, real pastors and priests have had their faces stolen and puppeted by AI, used to beg strangers on the internet for money. One beloved priest with over 1 million followers had to publicly warn his own audience that the man in those fundraising videos wasn't actually him. Even his mouth movements had been faked by a machine. Fraud watchdogs have started tracking AI scams as their own category now. And we're talking tens of thousands of victims and hundreds of millions of dollars lost in a single year. Bob Joyce just happened to be the perfect target for this kind of thing. A real, kind-faced man. A huge library of free video and audio online, and a built-in audience of gentle, grieving fans who came looking for a little comfort. To some faceless operation chasing clicks and cash, that's basically a gold mine. And they will keep mining it for as long as we keep clicking without stopping to think. So next time one of those confession video clips pops up on your feed, and your heart does that little flip because of a familiar voice, hang on a second, and think about what's actually being sold to you. It's not the truth about Elvis. It's your own hope, repackaged, priced, and handed right back to you by someone who doesn't care about the king, and definitely doesn't care about you. So here's my real question for you. Down in the comments, Tell me straight, did you ever actually believe Bob Joyce might be Elvis? What was it about that voice that made this story so hard to shake? I read every single comment, so don't hold back. And hey, if this kind of deep dive is your thing, smash that like button, subscribe for more, and I'll see you in the next one.